Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire Up with CJ show. We've had the honor to talk with John Perkins, the author of this book, Touching the Jaguar, Transforming Fear into Action to Change Your Life and the World. So welcome back, John.
Thank you, CJ. It's wonderful to be back with you. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so I'm finding myself and I feel like surrounding us is just fear. Fear of the unknown, um, fear of where to go next, fear of feeling helpless and hopeless because there seems to be not a clear next step that doesn't get undone after we move forward. I'm wondering how we could how we could shift our perceptions because really, as I understand, touching the Jaguar is shifting perceptions. I just enumerated a bunch of fears, but is there a way, as we're going through, and this is, yes, this is happening during a time of COVID, but this is happening all the time in life, right? Where we don't know where we're going, we're feeling helpless, hopeless, out of control, not sure where to go as a first step. Um, what advice or help could the Jaguar offer?
Well, there's a number of different levels for us to look at this on. And first of all, I just want to say, we're at a time that's been prophesized by many, many cultures.
Hmm.
The eagle and the condor prophecy of Latin America, the Himalayan prophecy of the 14th Dalai Lama. There's the Christian, there's the Jewish, there's the Hindu prophecies, there's the Mayan prophecy of 2012. All of these prophecies have told us that we this is a time when we need to make significant changes, and we have the opportunity to rise into a new level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about consciousness and how we change that consciousness. And we've been in the process of doing that. We talk about moving from a death economy to a life economy. Before COVID-19 came along, it was happening. B corporations, benefit corporations, the Green New Deal, conscious capitalism, 180 some odd CEOs of some of the largest, most powerful corporations last August met at something called the Business Roundtable and basically came out with a statement that we need to move from the short term to the long term objectives. We really need, they were saying we need to move from a death to a life economy. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't use those terms, but that's what they were saying. So we've been in this phase. Now we get this virus that's come along and it's really kicked us in the butt. And it's saying, come on, guys. And transforming fear into action to change your life in the world. What is our greatest fear? It's all the things you mentioned, and it's often a fear of change. People don't like change, and we've been confronted by that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we've all seen that we can change. There's been resistance, but now even the president is saying we should be wearing masks. That's a big change for everybody. We've realized I've been I was supposed to do a book tour, signing these books and going and speaking at places in Miami and Washington D.C. and New York and Chicago and all over. And I'm doing it now virtually. I don't have to fly there, and it means that people who've been to those bookstores who live in Europe and sign their email thing, they're on it. So I don't have to fly to Miami. And if I did fly to Miami, I'd probably only be speaking with people who live in the Miami area. Whereas now that's that same bookstore, I've reached people in Sweden and Italy and elsewhere. So we've seen that change can be very productive. And, I like to tell people, if you are feeling stressed out because you're just saying to yourself, I can't self-isolate for another day. Forget about a week or a month or how many months. This is a big jaguar to touch.
Mm-hmm.
I can't continue like this. But if you touch that jaguar and it says to you, hey, didn't you always want to learn to play the flute? You've got a flute. You can go online and learn how to play it. Didn't you always want to write a book? Oh, here's your opportunity. Didn't you always want to read more books? Didn't you want to spend more time on the telephone with your family who lives in another country? Didn't you want to garden? Didn't you want to blah, 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 blah? So this is the time, for us to really look at what does this offer us? What does COVID-19 offer us? And it's already offered us a very, very different view of racism, of white privilege, of police brutality. We've
Mm,
been, this virus has helped us see a shadow side of ourselves in the United States and in many other parts of the world. And it's it's a great gift. And
mhm,
I think, this fear of change that I talked about, we've realized that we can change. We may not like it always, but usually in the end, it comes out to serve a good purpose if we go with it. If we
mm,
fight it and resist it, it's not so good. But if we move with that change, and I think every one of us can probably think of many times in our personal lives when we've been called upon to make some changes if we didn't really want to make those changes.
mm,
And but once we made them, things got better. Maybe we didn't ever want to leave home when we were teenagers. Like, wait a minute, no, 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 I don't want to go off to work or college or whatever it is. But once we've done it, it's like the bird sitting, the little baby bird sitting on the edge of the nest, or the little kitten. This little kitten here just came to me a few weeks ago, and she didn't really want to leave her mother and her brothers and sisters, but she's a lot happier now, I got to tell you. She told me so. uh, but once the bird, I don't want to leave the nest. But once it leaves the nest, it finds that, oh my gosh, life
mm,
has changed for the better. It's
mm,
become an adult. It's got freedom. It's able to move
mm,
forward. So we see that change, even though we may resist it, it can be extremely good. And I think the greatest fear here is that we will try to return to the old normal, the old death economy.
mm.
If we do, we're going to be kicked in the butt harder. There's going to be another virus, of who knows what's going to come along, because we didn't listen to the hurricanes and the fires and so forth. We really didn't address the deep issues behind them. We fought the fires with water guns and so forth, and planes dropping water. For the fires, we fought the hurricanes by building hurricane proof houses if we could, and so on and so forth. We didn't really look at the real problem. And
Yeah.
all of these things, climate change, COVID-19, species extinction, forest destruction, all of these things are problems, but they're not the problem. They are symptoms of the bigger problem, which is this death economy, an economic system that's consuming itself into extinction, that's given us amazing things, incredible science, technology, medicine, art, so on and so forth. But it's come to an end. It's reached its limit. And we really need to accept that. We need to touch that Jaguar and say,
Mm,
okay, so what's the change we make? What's the new perspective
mm.
we have that takes us into a life economy? The perception of how do we move forward into a better world for the long term as well as the short term? And to some degree, it's really about how do we become more spiritual? How do we
Yeah.
raise our consciousness to this level of realizing that we don't need all these little trinkets that we keep spending money on. We don't need to
Yeah.
keep buying those things. They're not making us happy anyway.
Yeah, so I had two things that kind of popped into my head, the insights that I got from what you just said. I mean, there's personal changes that you're talking about, personal changes like the amount of consumption. To what extent are we racist in our own way, shape, or form? Though, how are we greedy, racist, hate-filled? You know what? Like look at our own personal stuff that we bring in. The Buddhists talk about that to be bodhisattva. It's about actually healing your own suffering, and then after that, helping other people do the same. And the thing that kind of and it's not necessarily going back to the way it was and like reestablish everything the way it was. Like it seems like to me one of the things that people are looking at is nonprofits, even the way that nonprofits were structured before, it's like rethinking how we could actually really make the kind of evolutionary change versus just taking whatever we were doing, even if it was good, productive things for a a new economy. How can we do kind of like how can we actually think about it in an evolved way versus just keep on doing, oh, COVID happened, let's just go back to what we were doing. It seems like it's an opportunity to, even if you're doing changing things, to even think about how you would change things up. I don't know if that makes sense. That's what kind of hit upon me.
Yeah, and I think we can go into some details perhaps in another session where we get a little more time, but as a sort of a general thing, a number of years ago, the Dalai Lama invited me. I was in India with a group of about 30 people, and he invited us to spend the afternoon in his living room in Dharamsala with him.
Mm,
It's just us,
lovely.
group with him. It was beautiful. And one of the people asked him if he had any regrets about leaving Tibet under the, running from the Chinese basically and leaving. And he said, regrets are a waste of time basically. But he said, he went into that a little more detail. But then he said, but it was a tough change to make, of course. But look how it changed everything. He said, if I hadn't done that, you probably never would have heard of me.
Mm,
Uh, and he went on to explain how the fact that he had to flee Tibet and now he's out in the world writing books and speaking in places and doing amazing things that truly, when I was a kid, the Dalai Lama was a word, and there was a book about I can't remember even the name of it now, but it was about some plane that crashed up there, but it was this very, very remote thing. And then after he got, the Chinese changed all that for him. And yes, it's unfortunate that what happened to Tibet, and he's very clear on that. But at the same time, it created a change in the world attitude,
mm,
the way the world looks at Buddhism. Just
mm,
totally changed it. And I think another way to look at this is that a shadow is created by shining a light on a solid object. Like, and
mhm,
the solid object in this case is the death economy. A light
mhm,
has been shown on that in the United States and around the world. It's created this shadow. How do you get rid of a shadow? You raise the light, and as you raise the light, the shadow gets smaller and smaller. You're
mm,
raising consciousness. So
mm,
what we're doing right now is we've become conscious that we've created a system that's failing us. It
mhm,
just isn't working. The glaciers are melting. Nobody can question that. The
mm,
oceans are rising. Climate is changing. There's no question about that. And so where our consciousness is rising, and as I travel around the world speaking at events in many different countries, people show up, thousands of people sometimes, big audiences, little audiences, but the fact of the matter is people around the world are understanding that we're living on a very fragile space station, the Earth, and we humans are the pilots, and we've been navigating and driving the space station toward disaster. It's time to reboot the system.
mm,
And that means a change of consciousness, which is this whole idea of changing
mm,
perception,
mm,
changing reality by changing perception. And it began happening several decades ago, really, and it's been increasing, where people are becoming more and more aware of this. And now this coronavirus and all the attitudes around racism and immigration and also many things that are just boiling up now, they're helping to raise this light. As we raise this light of consciousness, the shadow diminishes.
mm,
And there's always, when there's a consciousness revolution in the world today, but always when there's a revolution, there's pushback.
mm,
Status quo does not like change.
mm,
And so it's trying to convince the rest of us we don't want change. It will do everything it can to convince us. The status quo, the people that are making most of the money and have most of the power, they're trying to convince us that we don't want. That always happens, but we take strength from that. So agents of change, revolutionaries, are like good martial artists. If you're confronting somebody who's bigger and stronger than you, you don't try to fight them with your strength. You use their strength against them. We
mm,
take energy from this, and that's how we turn things around.
mm. Lovely. I love the idea of, and I think the aha that I was trying to say, and I think that you just did a beautiful job of explaining your vision of this, is that it's about a consciousness. So even though you may have been doing great things before, this is just not for government and all the these big agencies, authoritative figures, big companies to make changes. It's for everyone to make a shift in consciousness. It's not just corporate consciousness or governmental. It's everyone, include no matter what you were doing. How can you all shift to a higher state and look at the current situation from a higher level of consciousness and create from that space versus the lower space? And I think that's a big aha for me. I like it.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. We've been talking to John Perkins about touching the Jaguar, transforming fear into action to change your life and the world. Thank you
My
so much.
pleasure,
So much
Susie.
gratitude talking to you. Thank you.
Quiet, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show and would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.